You know, there's nothing I love more than being in Memphis with John Siebeling, Pastor John Siebeling.
We have a lot of fun.
We have a lot of fun. Been pastoring Life Church now for a minute.
25 years in November. November 10th will be 25 years.
That is goodness. And we've been friends for 30 plus years.
How about that? Yeah.
I mean, I knew you as a worship leader. I knew you teach at college. I knew what you did in Africa. I think you were one of the creators of the trucker hat. And so you love the trucker hat. You wear those a lot in your life. You do a lot.
I wish I could pull it off. Can't do it.
and you and Leslie are some of our closest friends. Our families with, you know, Mark and Anna, and of course our kids. We've done a lot of life together.
Amazing.
We've been friends in each other's life. We've been overseers in each other's lives.
Yep.
We helped start ARC. I mean, all those different things.
Right, and ARC is what, 20 years? I mean,
ARC's 20 years. So it's been pretty incredible. Give me an update on Life Church. What's happening in Life Church right now? We're out of COVID, man. Things are happening.
Life Church is doing great. I mean, we, you know, like everybody else, we navigated those waters the best we could. Feel like we came out stronger. I kind of feel like, you know, God uses those seasons to prune and reposition and shakes what can be shaken. And so I feel like we came out stronger, wiser, hopefully. But church is doing great. Yeah, doing really good.
So I have something in my office right now. It's the original plan for Life Church.
Oh,
you handed it to me 26 years ago when you got back from Nairobi. We had already planted Healing Place. So I remember you showing up in that old nursery.
I think you're the only one that still has it.
And I still got it. I saw it the other day. I keep it in my desk.
That's amazing.
Valuable things like my wedding license and a birth certificate of our children and the Life Church, original
strategic plan.
The strategic plan. And it says Memphis on it. You got back off of the mission field and you had a heart for Memphis.
Right.
You gave a plan out and we sat and talked about it. And talk to a church planner. What was different from your plan to real time?
Oh, everything. I mean, you know, I would love to get that plan from you, by the way.
Yeah, maybe.
Because I don't have.
There's a price.
I don't have a copy of it myself. It's like, I guess it's Mike Tyson who said, you know, everybody has a plan until they get hit in the face. You know, and that's the truth. But it's good to plan. I think it's good to have plans.
You wish you'd had ARC.
Yeah, it's good.
I do too.
Exactly. I mean, it was 5 years before ARC. Didn't have a clue. I mean, there was no internet, right? Back 25 years ago, no one was, you know, Googling how to start a church. So, you know, it was tough those first couple of years getting it off the ground. I think what made it tough is my expectations were off. I thought, you know,
talk about that.
Well, I just thought we're going to come into town, and you know, we were in Nairobi, Kenya, and we were serving at a church that was
blowing up.
It was blowing. It was blowing and going. We were meeting outside a city stadium. It was like a you know, a revival, you know, every weekend in church. You know, sort of like a tent meeting, an evangelistic kind of revival.
Run around the track.
Lot of momentum, and then you come to
came from a great church.
Yeah, you come into a city, you don't know anybody and you don't have anything. And you're starting from scratch, so it's going to take some time. I mean, you're building something up out of the ground. You know, it's like what Billy Hornsby used to talk about, moving from a resource-rich environment to a resource-poor environment. We didn't have anything. We had to create the resources.
Yeah.
So anytime you're doing that, it's going to take time. And so I think my expectations were off. I mean, we did well in those first few years. It took us a few years to break 200, but we broke 200, and we grew, and we grew, and we've grown every year. We've grown every year for 25 years. Now, some years it was smaller, obviously, than others, and not a lot of rapid growth.
Right.
There was a few years of rapid growth, but
you've had slow, steady, solid growth.
Every year we've had growth increase over the previous year in both attendance and income, and so it's steady. It's healthy. It's
what do you think? There's a lot of change in church planning. You do a thing called Make Room whiteboard sessions. So you're dealing with church planners who planted a year ago, 3 years ago.
Right.
You're one of the great resources for ARC, that when a guy gets a church planted, says, man, how do I do small groups? How do I do a leadership team? How do I do culture? How do I do money? We send them here and to learn about how to sustain growth, how to be healthy. But what do you think, I'll put you on the spot, what do you think still works that worked 25 years ago?
Prayer. I mean,
It's just prayer.
preach the Bible.
Yeah.
Love people.
Love people.
A ton of things are
Leadership.
exactly the same. Leadership, culture. Those are all principles that are undying. They're unending principles. And, helping people, serving, having a serving culture, missions, outreach. These are all things that we still do that we did.
You did then.
We did at the beginning. And, the Bible says there's nothing new under the sun. So I think we kind of reinvent, and repackage.
Sure.
We repackage ideas and repackage principles, but they are, they're timeless. They're eternal principles.
Yeah. What I know there's like all of us. I mean, we launched a church, and there were some days that it's like, man, I don't know, I'm about ready to quit this thing. I remember having a leadership challenge with some main leaders, and they went another direction, and I thought, I wonder if we're going to lose the church over this. Can you remember? I know you and I have talked about these. Can you remember a moment where you thought, I may quit, or this thing may not make it?
Oh yeah,
Was there a moment, or a week, or a season, or an event?
Yeah, there have been a few moments. Well, there have been plenty of moments when I wanted to press eject.
Yeah.
I think there's probably one season I remember when I wondered if we were going to make it. And what's interesting is it was in a season where we were really growing rapidly. Wow. It was basically we didn't have our finances, in order really. I mean, and so we were a little bit over our head financially to move into the building, to get into the building that we got into that created the growth. We kind of took some big risks. It all worked out. I mean, it kind of really turned around pretty quickly, actually. But I do remember thinking, wow, I'm not sure if we're going to survive this season. And it wasn't because of a lack of growth, or it was just we didn't have our money right. I tell guys, there's a couple of things you got to make sure you get right. One of them is money. You got to know strategically how to handle finances and how to be a good steward, margin, integrity, all those kind of things that we talk about. But Jesus said about finances, if you don't know how to handle the worldly wealth, the riches of this world, who's going to entrust to you true riches? So there's a spiritual connection between money and kingdom, the kingdom of God. I mean, I think it's, you got to be shrewd, you got to be smart.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I was a little rabbit trail there, but
but what's interesting is, like, I didn't ask you to come up with a scripture or a Bible principle. That's actually who you are. When you read your Bible, you pray, you spend time with God. So long as I've known you've been a great preacher. You've always, I think you bring the word in a simple way. People can understand it. I love hearing your messages because you have messages that you can repreach, which is, I think, fabulous. So guys can listen to you and say, okay, I can do that. I can figure that out. Who has influenced you?
We all repreach each other's messages.
Yes, we do.
Let's be honest.
Yeah. Who's influenced you? Who are your influences?
You've influenced me. I mean, our friendship, friendships. I think the older you get, it's more about the people that you walk with on a long-term basis. Joyce Meyer's been a huge influence. Mm-hmm. Both her teaching, Bible teaching, her generosity, her integrity.
Yeah.
I think there's preaching influences, and there's leadership influences, and there's a wide variety. I mean, we've all been pretty blessed to have some amazing people around us.
We've had great friends
that have done some amazing things.
Yeah.
I like to say I have the privilege of having friends that lead the largest churches in the world and the largest organizations in the world. I mean, that's a privilege. I don't take that for granted at all.
Well, now we go around and you've got multiple campuses, and people from all over the country are learning from you. You're teaching pastors, you're launching campuses, not only here in Tennessee, but around the country. But it was slow and steady growth. And during what is the attributes of slow and steady growth?
The attributes of slow and steady growth. I think, you stay faithful to people, and you stay committed to people, and you build into people's lives that you're not sure what's going to come of the relationship. You're not sure, like, for example, we have people on our team that have been here for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, that are pillars and are amazing leaders. Well, you don't know that when you're first getting to know each other. They don't know. they don't know. They don't know what our church is going to end up becoming, and I don't know what kind of leader they're going to end up becoming. But you forge a relationship and you stay loyal. Yeah. You stay committed. I mean, you and I've been committed to each other and faithful to each other for 30 years. What did we have 30 years ago? We didn't have not what we have today.
Living waters and crossfire.
But it's friendship and it's loyalty and it's faithfulness. It's I like to think that we hold each other accountable, and we've had difficult conversations. It's not all about the joys of friendship. It's not all about the ups. It's also being faithful and being true. I mean, I think faithfulness means the willingness to have a difficult conversation that you don't want to have, that you're up half the night tossing and turning because you have to have it the next day. But that's to me, that's faithfulness too. And that's those kind of conversations are the conversations that have helped direct my life when people have been honest with me. And so I don't know if those are attributes of slow and steady growth, but just staying at it and coming back Monday and coming back to work on it Monday, finishing Sunday, being a little discouraged about things, coming back Monday, having faith again for another week and going right back to it. And I like to tell guys, and I think it's so important, you lead the church and you build the church Monday through Friday. Yeah. The weekends are super important. Don't misunderstand me, but it's getting in on Monday and all right, regrouping and what do we need to fix and what do we need to work on, and then you're going at it another weekend, and then you do that enough. It's like the Jim Collins Good to Great. Yeah. It's the flywheel, and you're pushing, and then ultimately the wheel is turning, and you don't have to push as much. Yeah. It's going on its own. It's momentum from years of pressing into things that are important, that are mundane, right? I mean, great things are built in ordinary moments, not in big.
It's small steps. Right. Dylan and I have been coming here a long time, been preaching here probably once a year for 25 years. I feel like other than, the church we pastor at Healing Place and Church of the Highlands, I probably preach here more than anywhere. Right. And there's never been a time that we've come here that we did not talk about staff, culture, family, relationship. It is huge. I wrote down, when I describe you, I would say staff, culture, health, 5-star team, diversity, authenticity, next generation. You're doing those things well. And it's just when we leave here, I know this room here is one of those family gathering spaces for your team. And we're here with kids and your team. And you create that culture of team, health, organizational health. Obviously, there's a care to that. You're caring for people. How have you seen that grow? What has been the challenges to team, to staff culture, to volunteers or people that you pay?
Dino, I mean, it's things it's having a heart, just having a real, genuine heart for people, being authentic, being genuinely concerned. I think loyalty is two-way. It's a two-way thing. It's not just up. But I feel a sense of loyalty to the people that are on our team, and especially the people that are around the table with Leslie and me leading in a day-to-day basis. Their families matter to me, their livelihood. I want them to feel like they're blessed and that they have a great place to come to work, and that they're satisfied with what they're pouring their life into, that has eternal value.
What about the thing where we grew up a little bit and I was like, don't get too close, don't get too close. Right. How have you navigated that?
I just don't think you have to worry about it as much. But people are going to leave. Sure. And then you have to deal with your feelings and the pain of transition when it happens. So I think I'm better at being. Staying in a place where I'm close to people and have a friendship with people, knowing that they're not mine. I don't own them. Wow. And so
That's big.
God can move people whenever He wants to move people, and I need to be good with it. And if this is a person that's in my life or on our team or up close to me for 18 months or 18 years, I don't know that always. True. So
You think they're going to be here forever, but that may not be God's plan.
No, and I need to be good with whatever God's plan is. This is easier said than done. And then, I feel like I've learned how to grieve when people leave.
Yeah, hurt your feelings at first.
Yeah, you get your feelings hurt, and you need to grieve a little bit when people move. True. And I've had great friends that that I've been really close to, and God transitioned them. And we're still great friends, and maybe even greater friends today. But it's because, it's because we've kept that relationship. And you grieve when proximity means something. Like if you're working with somebody every day, you could potentially spend more time with that person than you do with your own family.
Sure.
And then, after 10 years of that, then all of a sudden they're not around anymore. You feel that, you know, and I think that's a normal thing. You can't stay in your feelings, though. You got things to do.
In your feelings.
You got things to do. So what's coming, and what am I building? But I feel like, a long time ago I heard a great teaching on the idea of grieving when things are lost.
Yeah.
And even new things mean that an old thing has been buried or whatever. Well, that old thing, needs to be grieved, I think, sometimes. And I don't mean to be all deep and, overly spiritual, but you take a minute, you take a season, you grieve a little bit, and then all right, let's go. We need to keep going, you know.
What do you think that, I know my father-in-law would tell me a couple things on the transitions of people, transition to, he said, hey, there comes a point where you need to say, hey, what's good for you and God is good for me.
Right.
Easier said than done.
Yeah.
And then secondly, the other thing he would tell me, that when you have people on your team that have served you 5, 10, 15 years, and you got to figure out what that is for you. But I made a decision that anyone that had given their time and had sacrificed for 10 years has the ability to transition to something else without me, raining down the hate and being like, how could you go do anything else? This is the only thing.
Right.
And I think you've launched campuses. You've been a part of ARC. You've helped start 964 churches.
Yep.
But then you've sent some guys out to lead a church, their own autonomous church.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when you're older, that's easier than when you're younger, because again, you take it personal. You don't know how to grieve that. But then the older you get, the more you begin to realize that God is doing it in different ways.
Yeah.
And it can be celebrated given the right steps.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you celebrate it, but you also have to realize I'm building an organization.
Exactly.
I'm building something. And so I've got to keep, to use another example, I got to keep loading the gun. Because if they leave, I have to have somebody else to take their place. So my strength of my church, my identity, whatever you want to say, can't be dependent on that particular person because they can leave next month. So I need to have a bench. That's the whole leadership development piece. I need to have a bench of people that are ready to serve and ready to step up. It's going to feel different. They're going to be different. But that's a part of the celebration of leadership development. Yeah. And I think that's how the church grows. That's how the kingdom grows, for sure, because then you have somebody who's been raised up and they've left, and then you have somebody else that's been raised up, and you've multiplied.
I've watched you do that all these years. How have you managed the fear of a player leaving? You're running a football program, and man, your key running back is going early. He's going into the draft early, and it is the bench.
Yeah.
But you have to manage your own emotions. You have to manage your own fear, your own insecurities, your own there was times when I pastored that I would become a fatalist. It's like, oh God, it's all over. It's over.
It's all falling apart.
It's all falling apart. They're leaving. Why are we even doing this now? You get older, you manage it, you learn that it's, I had a guy tell me one time, we lost a key guy on our team, and he said, hey, remember, the sun doesn't rise and set on anyone other than Jesus, including yourself.
Absolutely.
And it was like, God, there was a freedom to that.
Yeah.
So develop a deep bench. Know that when they come off the bench into the game, they're going to play the game a little differently.
Yep.
Talk to me about that.
Well, you brought up the word fear. You can't fear.
Yeah.
You can't live in fear.
Yeah.
That's not of God. You can't be insecure. You have to be secure. You have to be secure in Him. You can't be afraid. You have to trust. And you have to celebrate, transition. When people leave, you celebrate, and you celebrate the new person stepping up. And, that's when you see how have I done as a leader. When transition happens, that's when that's when your leadership is, you get a grade. That's when you get a grade. Like how good have I been? I mean, there was a season we went through years no transition.
Yeah.
Then there's a 2 or 3 year season where there's a ton of people transitioning.
Is anyone staying?
Yeah, and it's like, okay, it felt a little crazy at times, but it's like we got amazing leaders. That's what we're about, and things just kept moving forward. So that's when you get your grade as a leader. Is it is it truly falling apart?
Yeah.
Or is it moving forward in strength? There are always people underneath. You have those A players.
Yeah.
You got some A players underneath that'll never get the chance unless those A players move out.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I didn't learn. I learned how to preach because I was given the opportunity to preach, and I was given a place to preach. And if it was always the same people always preaching and always leading, then we wouldn't have had you wouldn't have had the opportunity either. So.
Yeah, it took a leader leaving to do something else for me to get an opportunity.
There we go.
Come on, preach. It's that trucker hat theology right now, man.
I don't know why that's a theme.
It's because it's Axis.
It doesn't need to be a theme.
It's Axis conference, and it's about the trucker hat, and we're going to get you in one.
No, not a chance.
Not a chance.
Not a chance. Not in front of the camera.
No, man. But you have some merch on. You're going to rock some merch.
Yeah, I'll rock some merch.
It's amazing how far merch has come. Do you remember when we were youth pastors?
Fact that you call it merch.
Yeah, remember it was we would hope we could get a T-shirt.
Oh yeah,
just a T-shirt for the camp.
Gildan T-shirts. It was like sandpaper. It's like sandpaper.
2 or 3 washes. It's done. It's in the garage.
Yeah. No, it didn't get softer with every wash either.
Yeah. Could you imagine going to your senior pastor saying, "I'm gonna need a hoodie, a sweatshirt,
right,
some socks"?
No. A minute ago, I was like, I was looking at the merchandise for Access conference, and it was like a sweatshirt. Top and matching top.
Oh wow!
Top and bottom.
Yeah, your pastor would have given you approval for that all day long.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah, that would have worked. Hey,
it's a new day.
It is, and a better day.
Yeah, it is a better day.
It is a better day.
No doubt.
Talk to me about this. So, team culture here is fantastic. What are you looking for in a team? Here's the kind of team people. A lot of people watch it. They're on a team at a church. How do you excel? If I'm on the team and I really want to do well, I want to serve my pastor well. What do you think are just the great qualities of a team member?
You got to be positive.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be around a negative person.
Yeah.
You got to be willing to work hard, and that's not to say you can't rest and all the things that we've learned in this last season, which I think are so important. But you got to work hard. You have to be willing to work through other people and not do it all yourself. Meaning, are you building a team? Are you getting other people to do things?
Own a team, build a team.
Yeah, you've got to. Otherwise, you're an island, right? You're unto yourself, and you're a doer rather than a developer. So
that was some fire.
I mean,
doer.
We talk about that all the time.
Other than a developer.
Yeah, some people you give them a checklist and a to-do list, and that's it. And they're going to come back at the end of the day with the to-do list checked off. Okay, that's literally a lowest level. Like, right? I need you to figure out your own to-do list. Really, is what I could hope that you would do.
Yeah, after a few times at least.
But you're developing other people to do the work of the ministry. It's Ephesians chapter 4. Yeah. Rather than doing all the work yourself, you're developing other people to do the work. That's how things multiply. It's
amazing how Life Church has grown. I mean, multiple campuses, which that's a learning. You had to learn through. I think we all learned. We all learned through multiple services.
Right.
Then you learn through multiple campuses.
Right.
And then all of a sudden there becomes some multiple expressions, a dream center, an outreach truck, a school of ministry, a conference. You've got these different expressions now. So you've grown through all those, correct?
Yeah. I mean, it's complicated, right? Church is not like it used to be. Yeah. It's much more complicated. The cost financially, what it takes to pull something off and do something with excellence, it's just complicated. So you learn how to navigate those waters, and the whole school of ministry thing I think is so powerful because it's the expression of developing leaders. And
you've always had a version of that.
Yeah, I mean everybody I think has learned that an internship program is important, and it's because we value people. Yeah. And we want people to value ministry, and so you create these environments for people to experience ministry and get their hands on. We always like to say, it's not about just sitting in a classroom learning, but it's getting your hands on the steering wheel and being able to feel what it's like to drive, and I think that's where you really learn, and probably the majority of our staff has come from our internship program. There's that whole hire people from outside or hire people from within, and I think typically people are like, man, if there's somebody within that has the culture already and has the understanding, great. Sometimes you bring people from the outside that bring a level of skill or experience.
And we all started this small. I mean, I remember Healing Base. By the time I left, we were on like our 5th version, and it was there was 6. I remember our first was six students. And you see that at every church. I know whether it's now turned into a college or now it's turned into a full-blown internship that's placing. I mean, it all starts. I think encourage pastors that, hey, it can start small. It's probably going to morph a lot. I mean, all those things are okay. You don't look at a big college or look at this and say, oh, I want that. That's just not.
No, you learn how to do it better. And so when you learn how to do it better, you change. You change it and you do it better. And so, I mean, it's McDonald's. That's why you can drive by one McDonald's that's brand new. It's the latest version of the building, McDonald's, right? And then you drive by another one that hadn't been updated yet. It's gonna eventually get updated to that, and then that new one will be updated. It's just the update is just constant because you're learning how to do things better and what the needs are of the community that you serve and
that's the same
leaders.
And wouldn't you say that's the same with campuses? I mean, how many versions of campuses have we all learned? I mean, we this guy did it, and then this guy, and then you run to Seacoast, you run to Life, you run to Rick Warren, you run over here and run from Larry Osborne, all these different versions. And
I think for us, like we're in a total. When beginning of COVID, we went into we call it a strategic review. We looked at every single practice, and we looked under every rock, and we kind of identified 5 or 6 cultural things that had to change in order for us to go where we felt like God wanted us to go, which is developing locations outside of the Mid-South with Wayne Francis in New York and other places, other locations. I mean, the fact of running an organization that's multi-state. And layers of leadership, it's just so complicated from the HR, the legal, the financial side of things, all the way to the artistic design of whatever. I mean, so it's just so complicated. So you learn, and then you're like, okay, I think we got a good model. And right about that time, there's an introduction of something different that challenges the model, and then you go back to the redevelop. To me, it's the fun part, and it's the part that keeps us coming to work every day. I mean, like let's keep tinkering and keep tweaking and keep
The word tinkering.
It's like it's this incessant of tinkering of things to make it better. I think it's it's one of the things that I really enjoy.
When I think about guys who do that well, I think of yourself. I think of Chris Hodges. I think of Steve Robinson. I tell people all the time, if you want to learn how to get it better, then you learn from Steve Robinson, you learn from John Siebeling, you learn from Chris Hodges. Because you guys get up every day looking at the engine and believing, I think I could get a few more horsepower out of it. I think I could get it to perform a little better. So let's tinker with it. Let's talk about it. I know we did that at Highlands through COVID. Looked at different ways.
Totally.
Do we scale back? Do we move forward and using the finances wisely, and how to position, how to look at the opportunities. What's God? What's not God? I mean, it's a lot of leadership. I mean, it's a lot of leadership. Whether it's 50,000 or 20,000 or 200. It's still leadership that's willing to be flexible in today's world.
And the biblical name for it is pruning, obviously, right? Jesus talked about in John 15. If you don't bear fruit, you get pruned. If you bear fruit, you're pruned so you can bear even more fruit. So the pruning is that cutting away process. It's that tweaking. It's that trimming. It's that how can we make it better? It's a challenge. It's a challenge for some people because there's a sense of perfectionism that's associated with it. Like and a perfectionist is, and I can be that way. You can it can rub people the wrong way, because it's like nothing.
I'm married to one.
Nothing is ever good enough. Like, is it ever going to be good enough? So you have to figure out a way to stop and celebrate and to appreciate what we've done and what we've accomplished. But at the same time, how can we make it better? And I don't have that figured out. It's I think it's a tension that you always are trying to manage and live with.
Tell me about New York and Boston. This is awesome. So how many campuses here now? And then talk to us about what's happening around the nation.
I think we have 5 or 6 in the Mid-South.
Okay.
A few years ago, we launched a location down in South America in Santiago, Chile, which is...
And you learned something there.
Which is an amazing location. And Chile is an amazing country. Santiago is a very cool city. I like to tell people, it's like, if you've been to South America, it depends on where you've been, right? Because portions of South America, like Santiago, literally feel like Europe. I mean, the malls and the So we did. That was really our first kind of foray into locations outside of the Mid-South, and it had has a missions element to it because it's a Spanish-speaking country. So kind of felt like a few years back that God wanted us to expand outside of the Mid-South, obviously with Santiago, and then started talking with Wayne, and New York came online, and then Emmy and Emily Vasquez up in Massachusetts, and so it just, I feel like it's not as much strategic as it is just divine flow. It's more about the people.
That's big.
It's more about the people that God adds to us that we feel like we're supposed to connect with. We've got a great couple, Justin and Carolina Fraley, who have just joined our team. They're going to be here for 18 months, and then we're
residents.
Yeah, but they were senior pastors for 15 years in Southern California, and they felt God call them to something new. We started talking. And they said, well, if we do launch a church, which we want to do it just like Life Church does, so we may as well come and be a part of what you're doing. And so we're going to launch them as a Life Church. We don't know what city yet.
That's
so
exciting.
But it was more about them than it was about the city. And there's other international locations. So what we're doing is we're kind of turning our organization kind of on its head a little bit to figure out how we can structure to support those other locations, so they get the Life Church culture, they get the support and the resources that they need from us. But there is a little bit of autonomy is not the right word. Is a little bit of independence that in these other locations outside of the Mid-South, there'll be live preaching, and they'll take on the culture of their community, so they can really engage culturally with where they are.
What I think is interesting is traveling, you're talking to guys about multiple locations and multiple cities. I think sometimes they start with the wrong question, or they start with the wrong feeling or the wrong idea. It's like, man, I really want to plant a church there. I really want to have a church there. I really, I've always dreamed of having a church in that location. And there's not the divine flow or the people. And we've all done stuff ahead of time. Sure. I mean, you and I have done ministry a long time. There's been times you and I have shared ideas through the history. It's like, man, we're going to do this, and all of a sudden it's like, man, great idea, not the right time.
Exactly, and that means that if you do it and it's not the right time, it's the wrong thing, right? It just doesn't work. I mean,
man.
So you may as well not even.
Oh, you rally the troops, you get fired up, you do that staff meeting, man. You give that talk. We're doing this, and 6 months later, it's like, man, we're not even near ready for that. Yeah. And so and then all of a sudden God starts doing it. There is a divine flow to it. So explain divine flow, not just campus wise, explain it life. Because there's somebody watching who says, I don't understand divine flow.
Okay, well, I would say maybe another way to say it is grace. When I always say you're graced for a place. So and you're graced for people. Yeah. Right. So you and I have a grace for each other, and there's a divine flow. When I say divine flow, I mean primarily with people. Mm-hmm. So it's an old John Osteen word. It is. It's a book. He wrote a book.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Called Divine Flow, and in the book he references this idea of when there's somebody that you're supposed to do life with. I mean, there's a flow with that person. So
that's how art came about.
Yeah, I think that's Jesus said, he was talking about marriage, but I think it's a relational principle. What God has joined together, let no man separate. So I think when God joins you to people, that word joining in the Greek language, it literally means to be glued together for future purposes. And I think I think that's how God builds. He builds through relationship. He builds through God-appointed, God-joined, divine flow relationships. So, I think, Wayne and I talk about the fact that I wasn't looking for him and he wasn't looking for me. And that's how it works. It's more of just God opens doors and puts people together, and all of a sudden there's a connection and there's a divine flow and partnership. And what we can do together is so much more than what we can do individually. And it's even exponentially so much more. The multiplication effect of two people coming together is so much more powerful than just 1 + 1,
Yeah, and that counters to the. I think I see this sometimes in certain generations or certain younger guys, and that's I'm not throwing everybody into the same group, but really what I'm looking for is my best opportunity. That's just not kingdom. I think there's opportunity in the kingdom, but I think it doesn't happen with just I'm looking for my best opportunity. I don't believe that's divine flow.
To me, it's all about calling.
Yeah.
It's what are you called to do, and who are you called to do it with? And if you're called to do it alone, if you're called to do it, I mean by that, independent of other people or an organization, awesome. I think it's just all about finding you got to find out what are you called to do, and who are you called to do it with? I think that's big.
So what's the cost and the price that you are learning when you expand like that to another city? Because you've already learned something. You and Wayne have been on this journey now for 18 months, a year, 2 years.
Right.
You and Emmy are now a year in, or more than What do you say? Okay, here's what I didn't know. So someone watching that says, "Man, I've got a friend." I think because there's certain things that you believe happens when that comes together. Hey, you can fast track. There's an acceleration because we're coming together. We're better together.
Right.
More power, more resources, more team.
Right.
There's a centralized. We can collaborate more.
Right.
We can do this probably faster and cheaper together. But then there's some things that you're like, okay, this has cost us in this area because now we're kind of, we have our family, but now there's kind of ours, yours, and theirs. And you're bringing some. It's like a blended family.
Totally.
So help guys understand what that means.
Well, there's cost on both sides, right?
There you go.
So you'd have to ask Wayne or Emmy or these other Justin what they have to lay down, what they have to submit. I guess their church name, their logo, their you got to
give some of that up.
Their independence fully, so what it cost our team is all of a sudden our team had to begin to think about leading a church, not just with a Mid-South lens, with a Memphis lens. Now it's like, does this work in New York? Does this work in Santiago? Does this work in Pittsburgh? Does this work? You have to think.
Yeah.
Does this work in Boston? You have to think. And then you have to lead from that perspective, and it just everybody's had to grow in their thinking and their understanding. The legal side of things and the HR side of things, the financial side of things, all of that, all of our systems were stressed immediately when we went to a location outside of Memphis. Immediately, because everybody has to think, start thinking different. If all the guys in New York, the staff in New York and the church in New York and the church in Boston, and all, if they want to feel like they're a part of the family,
it's got to be intentional.
It's got to be. So immediately all of our systems were stressed and our structure was stressed, and I mean that in a good way, stressed. But it's hard. It's been a real challenge. You're scaling up an organization. Yeah. So just imagine what that means. You're scaling up to prepare for all these different
and that
locations.
It's the same. It's altogether different even when you go from one location to another location. It's still the scaling.
It is.
It's the stress on the organization.
Right.
I mean, I remember when we went to 2 services.
Oh, yeah.
When we were doing the 10 o'clock basic service, and man, we were rocking that 10 o'clock. And I remember the idea of sitting in a meeting and said, we're going 9 and 11. And it was like, wow. It's like the earth, the universe shook, and the earth stood still because our church was now going 9 and 11. And, worship, kids, blah, blah, blah. All those things kind of start taking place, in those areas. And again, it's just scaling.
Well, another way to look at it is what we all went through with COVID is your online campus.
Yeah.
I mean, how are you? We launched an online campus. I don't know. We have 3 or 4 people who are on full-time staff. We have an online campus pastor. We have an online kids pastor. We have an online, director,
pastoral care,
whatever. All this.
Yeah.
So you're supporting and taking care of people who you never see physically. You're reaching people. I mean, just the whole. And then, what's the strategy for your online campus? It can't just be, well, the strategy is that they'll ultimately come to church, come to one of our physical locations one day.
That's
maybe, but I think it's got to be bigger than that, right? So that whole philosophy of online that changed the game, and we can't go back to what it was before.
Yeah.
It's we have a couple of thousand faithful people that are on our online giving, went through discovery online, serving on the online campus, and they live in other parts of the country and other parts of the world. It's a whole different wineskin that we're not just going to close. All right, now church is opening again after COVID. No, it's a whole new thing that God's added to us, and I get concerned because I think guys are kind of going like, well, that's done now. Now we're going back to. Like, no, we can't do that.
Well, I know we started, we're planting more churches, we've got churches all over the country. So we went remote 3 or 4 years ago. Said, okay, we want a lot of our team to live other places.
Right.
We're going to go remote.
Yeah.
It did help us when COVID hit because we were kind of 30-40% remote. And that's just been to our benefit of, and you now, so you're doing that now.
Right.
I mean, you've got the guys and the team. I can say this, I was in New York a couple weeks ago at the Life Church in New York, and it felt Life Church. And what's amazing is I know the team goes through it and the leadership goes through it, but really for the people, I think there's a little bit of a bump. I think they're encouraged by it. I think the average person was very excited to be a part of something bigger, to be a part of something that maybe has more resources, can help more people. We're now a part of a bigger story, a bigger missions, a bigger outreach. That was nothing but a win at the people level. I think sometimes we stress over these things, but the average person that's just coming to church, taking the kids to soccer, going to come home, wash clothes, get ready for the rest of the week. I don't think they're thinking about it.
They got one question. The average person has one question, and it happens to be about the person that's leaving. So in Wayne's church, it was, is Wayne leaving?
Yeah, is Wayne good?
Is he still going to be our guy here? And yes, the answer is yes. So it's like, okay, well, whatever. It doesn't matter. The name of the church changes.
Exactly.
And if it provides better support for Wayne and for our pastor, and it provides us bigger opportunities. I mean, we pretty quickly after Wayne joined in with us, we purchased a building that they would not have been able to purchase.
Exactly.
We're doing the same thing in Massachusetts. So there's these advantages to a church connecting in because of a bigger,
without a doubt,
bigger support, bigger systems, structure, HR. Okay, it's going to be a little bit more corporate, right? Because we have these systems in place, but that's going to help us.
It's going to be a different organizational health.
But the average person, they should experience if anything, a better experience.
They're being cared and loved for, and having a better. Do you think that, it leads me to a question, do you think sometimes pastors, when they go through something like that, they They don't make the main thing the main thing. They worry about things that other people are not worried about. I think sometimes we can get caught up on things that the average person who's just struggling, trying to make ends meet, trying to get their kids to ballet, trying to make sure that the washer gets fixed and the dog goes to the vet. I just think sometimes they're not thinking about what we're thinking about.
Well, here's what everybody thinks about. What does this mean for me?
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. Like, am I going to have to go to church at a different time? And am I going to have a different pastor?
Yeah.
And as pastors, am I going to...
How does it impact me?
How does it impact me as a pastor? Am I going to... Is my salary going to change?
Yeah.
Is my are my freedoms and my opportunities going to change? What does it mean for me? Like, this decision that's before me, we all think about how is it going to impact me? And you know, you have to have the God factor in it. Is God in this? And you know, is God calling us to do this? That has to be the question we ask about everything. And then once you feel like, okay, well, that's probably the case, I think God's calling us into this, then you start getting into the nitty gritty details. Yeah. How is this going to impact me personally? Sure. And is it something that I want to do?
Yeah. So when you think about what's next for the church, there's guys that are trying to, we've been through COVID, talked about it online. We talk about there could be a way that you're coming together. Could be a way that there's a fusion of what you're doing and another person's doing. We've seen some of that. We've seen some guys come together. We just did a talk with Stephen Chandler and Jimmy Rollins.
Right.
What could we do?
Partnership.
Right. Those kind of things. What else do you see for the future of the church? When you think future, I know you're working hard to make sure that the next generation has a seat at the table. I mean, it's the Access Conference. I was here this weekend. You know, one of your young guys was hosting services. I mean, it's just not, you know, look kind of furniture. It is value. So that's a big value to you for the future. We talk about the future. There's going to be a lot of our friends transitioning the next 5, 10, 15 years.
Right.
So what does the church look like? What needs to shift in the next season for churches as it relates to reaching people and preaching the gospel?
Man, I think, to me, the bottom line for the church is to continue to answer questions that people are asking. And so I think diversity,
there you go,
racial issues, that's not going to go away. I think it was 2020 was hard for diverse churches because you had this, you know, you have diversity, and so anyway, it was complicated. But I think that's going to continue to be a relevant issue. You know, I mean, same-sex attraction, transgender issues, all those things are here, and it's understanding how are we going to talk about this from the Word of God, and it can't just be it's wrong or it's evil or like this is a real part of culture. So, I mean, those are kind of cultural questions that you're asking me. But one thing I know is the church will go forward. It always has. It always will. The big C church, Jesus said, I will build my church. And he will until he comes back, until the church age is over. It's going to keep growing. It's going to keep moving forward. God's going to keep using people, some people that we don't necessarily like or agree with. God's going to keep using them to build his church. And it's not about me. It's not about you. It's not about us. It's about him, and it's about trying to stay humble and obedient and you know, stay in the flow of what God's doing so that we can stay relevant, so we can keep answering those questions that people are asking.
A couple of things I've loved. I love what you and Wayne are doing with Black and White Leadership.
Yeah.
It's a podcast, it's a series, there's going to be a book, there's going to be church series, people can teach on diversity.
Right.
Love what's happening there. So
huge.
That's available. I know you've been talking a lot with mental health as it relates to what Emmy and his wife and he walked through. So you're talking about these things, which you're going to be doing with the whiteboard sessions, which is just incredible. Bringing pastors together, whiteboarding up, you know, helping them grow, helping them break, you know, ceilings. And man, we're running at 300. How do we break 600?
Right.
You know, you've always had a heart, you know, to help guys make more room in their life, in their leadership. So diversity is important right now. Mental health is important right now. Being able to train pastors is important right now.
Right.
What else is on your heart that maybe, man, this is something that I just feel like I'm supposed to be about or is something we need to be talking about?
I think you hit them all. I think that, young pastors and young leaders, I think, giving young men and women a seat at the table to lead and to learn and to make decisions, I think it's massive. And I think, you don't learn until you do, until you get your hands on it. Let them get their hand, let them drive. Let them get their hands on the steering wheel. Let them drive. Yeah. And it's not a threat to your leadership. It's an enhancement of your leadership. Right. So I'm really passionate about that. Those are kind of more of our big things is the serving culture and developing leaders culture, diversity culture, next generation culture. Just things that we felt like are a part of our culture that we've tried to stay true to.
I love being in service this weekend. Talked about Serve Day right around the corner. You're outreaching, you're engaging the community, and it's a good service feel. There's it's room to breathe. There's a Holy Spirit.
Talking about the weekend service.
Yeah, there's a power. Worship was phenomenal. Represented all the flavors.
Diversity.
You stepped in there, talked good about the offering, prayer. There's a time where people can connect, and that's what I want to ask you about. And and I think the preaching this weekend was pretty phenomenal myself. I thought that was outstanding.
Did you speak this weekend?
Possibly.
Oh yeah.
That's right. Of course. Okay. But anyway, I love in the service you have a moment. I want people to understand this moment that you create. Come pray, communion. Extended worship, there's a power, there's a touch.
Yep.
Tell me about that.
Typically on the weekend we'll have 4 songs, and this is just the mechanics of a service. The first 3 songs is people worshiping and engaged. After the 3rd song, someone will come up and we have what we call our ministry time, and someone will take 2 to 3 minutes, share an encouraging message from the Word about God's here. He's ready to meet.
Focus to people.
He's ready to meet your needs, and then they will explain that we're about to have another song, and during this next song, we're going to have our ministry time. Okay. And our ministry time consists of, you can come to the altar and kneel at the altar, which is the front of the stage, right?
Yeah.
It's just the front of the stage. We have communion tables set up for people to have communion, and we have prayer. We have people ready to pray on either side of the stage with with anointing oil or whatever. And so. We give people the opportunity during that final song. Other churches do this as well.
Sure.
And so there's a lot of movement that 4th song starts and people come down to the altar. Hundreds of people come to the altar and take communion and have prayer. And Dino, I think it's like, it's the modern day, the gifts of the Spirit are operating. Yeah. People are receiving prophetic words. We're praying for the sick. People are being healed. I get stories all the time about healing and about miracles. And so
you're taking the Lord's Supper.
It's one of my favorite things we do because it's systematic. There's a system for it, right? We do it pretty much every week. Some services we don't do it. If we're having baby dedications or something special, we don't do it. But pretty much every weekend we do it. And so there's always room for the Holy Spirit to move. There's always prayer happening. You can take communion pretty much anytime you want. And if you want to just stand there and worship, you can do that as well. But it gives
room. Went back into another song.
Yeah, the 4th song then is all the moving to all those different places. Or if you want to just stand and worship.
Are you going in the news after that? Are you receiving? Did you receive the offering?
Right after that 4th song, typically, we can welcome everybody. We can do the offering there, or we can do the offering at the end of the service.
Sure.
Either one. I think this weekend we welcomed everybody after that. We had a generosity moment, the offering moment. Then we shared some church news. Yeah, a little church news, a little Father's Day video, and then the message. But real simple.
What I did like about the ministry time, I noticed 3 things I thought were important.
Oh my gosh.
No, I thought it was interesting.
We're going deep into ministry time.
But I thought it was interesting, the wording. And I think sometimes we don't sweat the wording. We're not helping people along.
Okay.
And so you said something, our pastors have placed the communion out. Intentional. Okay. This is not something new. This is ancient worship.
Mm-hmm. Intentional.
Okay. And then you said something about the front of the church is an altar. Mm-hmm. Intentional.
Right.
And so you're helping people. And I know pastoring a church in Louisiana, where it's predominantly Catholics, I can remember going to some services where it's like you thought everybody knew everything. And then I remember realizing there's a lot of people that are coming in our experience who they don't know anything. And so I worked hard like that, where you would help let's try to help these Catholic folk, understand that we're good. You're okay.
Right.
To receive communion. We're not doing it the same way, but I would talk about the sacrament. There were certain wording, certain things that and that was all intentional.
All intentional.
And I think that's important today, because if not, then we're either 12th graders, and we've got a class full of 7th graders, and we've not helped them. We're not helping them, or either we're in 2nd grade, and we got a classroom full of sophomores.
Mm-hmm. And even that's true too. But even people who are in your church for the first time. I mean, our hope is 5% of our attendance is first-time guests.
5%.
That's a lot.
It's a good word.
But that's high.
Yeah, that sounds good.
But so think about that. It's, that's a lot of people.
Yeah, if I'm running 500, you're hoping there's 25 visitors.
Yeah,
which is fantastic.
And you can take church growth all the way out, right? So let's go 25. Let's do some numbers. So let's make it easy on ourselves, and let's say 30 visitors.
Okay.
Times 50 weekends. That's 1,500 people, right? That come to your church. And let's say your retention rate, your ability to retain, is about 10%, which is still really good.
Yeah.
So that's what, 150 people.
150 new people.
So that's what you could potentially grow if you have that many visitors every weekend. So
over 20 years,
and
it's 3,000 people.
The reality is, if you talk to pastors and they say, "Man, I'm believing next year that we'll grow, we'll double or something," and you're like, "Well, let's sit down and do the math of what it's going to mean to double."
Yeah. And if you're running 200 and you want to get to 400,
so
you better be putting some people through there.
You got to have some guests coming into your door. So then those guests, how can they have the best possible experience to try to understand why you're doing what you're doing?
Yeah, if they don't know.
Our music is really loud.
Yeah.
There's a lot of expression.
There's some movements.
And so we're in a traditional city. There's a ton of traditional churches. People that come to our church.
Dress on stage.
People that, and women doing ministry time. All that stuff has to be explained. And
could be humor and news.
And you can explain it, and the person can choose to not agree with it, but at least you've explained it.
That's so good.
So, our music's loud, people are expressive, and some people think, wow, this is too much. I don't know if this is right.
Yeah.
Well, it is right. It's in the Bible. That's why I said what I said this weekend. It's not modern worship, it's ancient worship. We say that all the time. So you come back this next weekend, you would hear it again, they're saying the same thing. Well, we're saying it to the 5%. We're not saying it to you. We're saying it to the 5%, who have never heard. And they don't. Why are we doing the altar? Why, and the communion piece, our pastors have set out communion is because in some people's mind,
that's holy.
They believe you need to be served communion by someone, an elder or someone that's
Louisiana.
So what we say is we have served you.
Yeah.
We've served in advance and we've set the communion out. So it's ready for you to come and because some people feel bad just walking up to a table and taking the communion.
It feels casual.
Yeah, it feels too casual. So little things like that. Now, someone may say, "Well, I don't agree with that," but
you're crushing church growth.
We still have said why we're doing it, and you could choose not to.
This is amazing.
Agree, but language is so important. Language either supports culture or it tears culture.
Whoever's watching this right now, this is the money. Because I circle this. How they've sustained slow and steady growth over the years, right there.
Well, you said earlier you appreciate my teaching or whatever. I don't think I'm a phenomenal communicator. I really don't. I think it's of the gifts that I think God has given me. I believe it's one of the gifts. I'm not trying to boast, but it's not. I don't think it's the top gift. But point being, I believe my communication style comes out of my desire to answer complicated questions with simple. I just want to break it down and try to be as simple as possible. And I'm not a debate type person. I'm not an arguer. So you can come and shoot holes in all my thinking if you want to. But it's the way I think, and I think it's what we're trying to accomplish. And at least we explain it.
Yeah. You and Pastor Chris Hodges are similar like that, because he wants every week to make sure people understand. Here's why we're doing what we're doing. Let me tell you what it's going to be like for this next hour and whatever, as you're along for the ride.
Right.
I want to point out some things to you as you're along for the ride.
And by the way,
which I think is so important.
And by the way, this, I don't know if you noticed, but we were on the third row this weekend. On Sunday morning. Well, Saturday night too.
I loved it.
Okay, so there's 2 rows of people ahead of us. All right, typically the first row is leaders and people.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you noticed in one of the services this weekend, the row in front of us, I think they were all new people.
Yeah.
So
You get to experience it.
I experienced church with them this weekend.
Yeah, it's perfect.
And it reminds you of like, oh man, I could tell they were new because they're looking around.
Yeah, time to figure it out.
They're a little overwhelmed. You get just a little overwhelmed. It's big. There's lights, whatever. So you experience it with those people. That helps you when you stand on stage to try to break down what we're doing here.
I used to pastor. I always did parking for at least one Sunday a year because I wanted to know what it felt like in that parking lot, and and you would see those new people.
Back in that day, that parking lot was a mess. Y'all had a mess.
It was a mess. It was a train wreck every Sunday. And then
just because it was a small parking lot.
Yeah, and then even like you said, I'd sit other places. I'd go stand in other places, and and I had a practice on Saturdays that I would go sit in a seat during prayer that I never sat. My goal was to sit in a different seat,
that's great.
To look at the stage, to see how people see me from this angle, from this part, and what the room feels like from that dynamic. To be, you're trying to put yourself.
Yeah.
To me, it's a part of intercession. You're putting yourself. You're standing in the gap for people that are walking in that are not there yet, and that maybe this is a hard move for them. I used to value so much when Catholics would come to our church, because I started thinking, man, that's a bold move to be raised Catholic and to walk up in here for the first time. Instead of looking at them like, hey, come on, I would always be like, man, I celebrate big, bold move. What can I do to help you? Because you've already taken about 100 steps. I can take a few with you in what you're doing. And I think that's a part of church growth. And you do that well because you love people. You've always loved people. And you want to make sure people are getting experience life here in Memphis.
75 to 90% of people who come to your church for the first time come at the invitation of a friend. So they've already been sold on the church. So they're stepping in typically. I mean, let's say 8 out of 10. So 2 people they drove by and they saw the building, right? So that does happen. But 8 out of 10 people, they're taking the words.
It's a referral.
It is, and they're taking the words of a trusted friend. So
don't blow it.
I don't want to blow it. I don't want to blow it. And I wonder what that friend told them.
Oh, come on.
About why they love our church so much.
Yeah.
So when you meet people in the lobby, when I meet people in the lobby.
We were in the lobby this week.
And so I know it's their first time. I always say, who invited you to church? Because that is typically the reason that they're there. And they'll say so-and-so and, what they tell you about what they tell you about the church? I love to hear those stories because then you kind of start hearing some patterns about what people are saying. And one of the most consistent things that people say about our church is there's a couple of them, but one of them is that it's just friendly. So I think that's pretty amazing that people will say, well, you love it because it's friendly. That had nothing to do with the worship, has nothing to do with,
wow. It's
one of the most common things. And that just shows you people's hunger to be in a place where they feel loved and appreciated and there's people that are like them that are friendly.